And I'm Tanner.
And you're listening to the Sencilla podcast, a conversation about simplicity. What's up, everyone? This is Emily and Tanner. No, it's been a while since we've been over here on podcast land, but we've been moving around quite a bit lately. We're now here in Isla Mujeres, Mexico, and we're finally sitting still for a little while, so we figured we'd come back on and chat for a little bit. We have had a lot of sailing firsts in the past month, and so we just figured we'd talk about all of the things that we've experienced that have been new to us and what we kind of thought about it and our experience and our feelings and all of those things. I think, might have talked about our plans a little bit earlier, but basically we went from Sarasota down to Marco Island in Florida, kind of hopping along the coast, and then we ended up doing a bit of a passage over to Key West, followed by a passage down to Havana, Cuba, where we quarantined for a little bit, and then we hopped along the northern coast of Cuba in some not so great weather before we did another passage over to Isla Mujeres, Mexico. So that's what we've been up to the past month. The first thing that we did that was a first for us was leaving the dock in Sarasota with no intention of returning, which was quite an interesting feeling. What do you think? How are you feeling during that time?
I was just nervous and anxious. I don't know. I don't think I was thinking about the long term, like the fact, like the enormity of leaving for a year. I was just thinking about, oh my God, I hope we make it to Sarasota Bay without sinking the boat. Well, how are you feeling about it?
Your mom, Tanner's mom, came to kind of wave us off, and we had been like living at her house most of the time the past couple months and spending a lot of time with her, and it was just interesting. We pushed off the dock and we were heading down and we were waving goodbye, and it was just like, oh, like, we're not coming back to this dock. Like, we're leaving and we're about to head to a different country and we're not coming back. So I think it was just the kind of, I hadn't really realized it until then, like what we were about to do. And in that moment, I kind of realized, like, oh, this is happening. We're leaving for a year. So it was interesting. It was a little bit of a like wait, because we didn't know what was going to happen, and we just kind of like left, and we were like, okay, here we go, without a lot of firm plans or anything like that. So it was weird. It was pretty weird. Yeah. And then we got to Sarasota. So we left Bradenton, which is like how many hours north of Sarasota?
It's not an hour, like sailing wise.
Yeah,
or
sailing
driving?
wise.
Sailing wise, it's maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours probably.
Yeah, so we only sailed a couple hours that first day.
Yeah.
And then it was my first time anchoring that night ever, which I didn't really know what to expect either. Tanner had done it before a couple of times when he was moving the boat around from the other side of Florida. But it was kind of a surreal feeling anchoring for the first time. And you can see all of Sarasota Bay, all the lights, all the city buildings and the sky rises, and you're just out there floating in the ocean. Well, not the ocean, but the ICW. And it's kind of just quiet and peaceful, and I really liked it. Except for when it got a little wavy, which sometimes it does at anchors, but it wasn't a big deal. But it was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, most people boaters spend like all their time in the marina, very little time at actual anchor, and it's a very different experience. Your boat is always facing into the wind, so you get a nice breeze pretty much all the time, even if it's only 6 miles an hour, 6 knots or whatever. You get a nice little breeze coming through your boat, and you don't get that at the marina a lot of times. And also, the little bit of swell or wake or whatever, a lot of times, at least the swell, not really the wake, but the swell, you're taking that on the front of your boat. So it's not as bumpy as you maybe would think it would be compared to a marina, where if you have somewhat of a swell coming across, it's just going to be hitting the side of your boat and rolling it around. So being an anchor is pretty nice. I like it. But yeah, it's very peaceful. It's like, we talk about it all the time. It's kind of crazy to be in for instance, in Sarasota, you have downtown Sarasota right there, and it's very busy. There's cars honking. There's people out walking. There's like the downtown life. And then you're out on your boat and you can see all those city lights and hear a little bit of the noise, but it's much quieter. It's peaceful. You're kind of secluded in your own little way. So it's pretty neat.
So we had a couple of other anchoring experiences between these two things, but for first time anchoring down the coast of Florida and then to the first time sailing in open water, which is when we left the ICW, was kind of freeing the first time, because the first time we weren't crossing anything. We were just out in open water. We could see land still a little bit, but not too much, and it was very, very secluded, but we knew that we were going to go back in towards land that night. So I actually loved the first open water experience that we had, because it didn't feel scary and it didn't feel like overwhelming. It just felt like, wow, this is really, really nice for a couple hours before we go back in and anchor tonight.
You talking about from Fort Myers down to Marco Island? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if we ever lost sight of land, but yeah, we were out. You could actually see the ocean for the first time. We were sailing with the ocean in view, you know? Yeah. I mean, I like that better than open water sailing, I'll tell you that. It's definitely not as, it doesn't make you as anxious, but yeah, it was really, that day was a really good day. It was really nice.
Probably one of our favorite days of sailing so far.
Yeah, the winds were coming off the coastline, so there was basically no swell, really, very little, and we were just cruising. It was a nice day, and then
we sailed the whole time. We didn't have to motor at all, which is really nice.
Yep, sailed all the way down until we got to our really bad anchorage that night, but yeah, that's another story.
So the next first that I have on this list is first scary seas. Do you want to talk about that?
First scary seas. What are we considering scary seas?
So
which one?
What happened was we got down to an anchorage just north of the turn before you go down to the Everglades in Florida.
I know what you're talking about now.
And the anchorage was really, really bad. It was not protected at all. And the winds were coming from the south instead of from the east. And so we were just rolling all over the place. And it was the sun was starting to go down. But we were like, we don't really know what to do. There's nothing around, like there's no protected areas. And so we thought, well, let's just turn the corner and hope we can get into this little cut down in the Everglades. And so we started to go out, and then.
Yeah. So now I know what you're talking about. Yeah. We were basically going to head east into the Everglades and try to find an anchorage. And right there's some really shallow shoaling that extends several miles off the coast. And there was about 25 knots of wind. We didn't know it was 25 knots because we were only getting like 18 or something.
And this day,
right
the weather was completely just wrong. Like every weather model was saying something different. And so we just had no idea what was going on with the weather.
Yeah, we had like a model saying 5 knots of wind and a model saying 25 knots of wind. So we didn't know what to do. And so we were getting like 18 where we were anchored. So we're like, oh, it's not that bad. So anyways, we start heading around this corner where the shoaling is. And it's like, it had just gotten dark. And the fact that it was like, all this shoaling and shallow water was causing the waves to basically be very steep and breaking and stuff. So, it was like 25 knots out there. As soon as you got around the headland, it was 25 knots. And that we were getting like some pretty scary, probably, 6 to 8 foot waves that were just like steep. They weren't rolling. They were just steep waves breaking. And I saw like 2 of them, and I was like, oh, let's go back. So we turned around and went back about, I don't know what, maybe we went backwards about 8 miles in order to turn into this little area
Marco
Island that gave us some protection, which we ended up not even getting that much protection, but it was better than trying to go into those waves. That was pretty scary.
Yeah, it was also our first time sailing in the dark, and so it was just compounded with the first like big-ish kind of scary waves that we'd seen, and it was dark, and it was a lot for that couple minutes that we were in it, and luckily we were able to turn around. The turn was scary, and then once we got going the other direction, it was okay.
Yeah, that was a good decision, I think. That would have been not a lot. That would have been a really unfun night if we would have kept going.
Yeah, that was also the first time we had to kind of make a decision on the fly, and we were both like, yep, turn around. It was pretty automatic. We just have no interest in being in dangerous seas, and we don't have that much experience, so we know it's not a good idea. And then so we left Marco Island the next day, exhausted because the anchorage was actually terrible and the winds were way higher than they said they were going to be. And then we went down. We were going to go cut into the Everglades that day because we hadn't slept at all. We're like, let's just go find an anchorage down there and we'll sail to Key West from there. But the winds decided to change course and just wanted to push us directly towards Key West. And so we just kind of started going. We made a decision midway that we were just going to go ahead and do our first overnight passage.
Yeah, we were like heading out to that headland again I was talking about where it becomes open water. And we're basically pointing straight at Key West. And we were like, well, the winds are coming out of the east. This is actually a pretty good winds to go to Key West, and it's going to be harder to turn into them and go into the Everglades. So we were like, oh, we didn't sleep last night. We're still exhausted, but it's like, I guess we might as well just go for it. And then we just made the decision to go ahead and do it anyway.
So our first overnight passage was not planned. It was kind of a spur-of-the-moment decision, which actually ended up being pretty good because we didn't have any time to worry about it or like get scared about it or anything like that. We just did it, and it was exhausting, like very exhausting, but it was fine. The weather was great. We were going upwind most of it-ish, so it was pretty bouncy, but when it got dark, I found that I almost liked it better when it was dark. I know you don't feel that way, but because you just focus on the instruments, you just focus on keeping, we don't have an autopilot, so we were just hand steering every 2 hours.
We didn't have one.
Yes, we'll talk about that later. So we were switching off every 2 hours throughout the night, just because we hadn't slept at all the night before, and we thought more than 2 hours we were going to fall asleep at the wheel. So, my 2 hours, I would just focus on the instruments. You couldn't see anything because there was no moon at all. It was pitch black. You couldn't see the waves at all, so they weren't scary to me because I couldn't see them. So I just focus on the instruments and go and keep us on course, and it was okay. It wasn't that bad. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it was, I don't know. Yeah, like you're saying, it's just stare at your instruments, take your 2 hours. It goes by pretty fast because you're so focused, and then you're just taking a nap. But yeah, the waves then were great too. Like, and we had no more than about 18 knots at one point, but mostly it was like 12 to 15. So the sea state was like 2 to 4 feet. Pretty normal. It was pretty good. It wasn't bad.
The best part about that passage was that it was consistent. Like, the winds were just coming from the same direction the entire time. We basically just stayed on the same course the whole way. We ended up getting pushed a little bit off and had to turn back in towards Key West, but the whole night it was on the same course. It was the same waves, and we were beating into it a little bit, so it was like we were going down the waves and it was a little bit choppy and bouncy, but we had been dealing with it all day, so it was just like the same thing again and again and again. It didn't feel, nothing ever changed. It didn't feel scary at all.
No, that was like, honestly, looking back on it, like, yeah, it was like mildly rough, but as far as like overnight passages go, that's been the best one because we didn't have to change anything. Like the winds, all of our other passages, we've had like the winds are dying, or we've had like scary freighters coming really close, or, that was just like a really chill. Looking back on it, it actually wasn't that bad. But another thing that was cool about it is seeing like the stars, because there was no moon, and we were out in the middle of nowhere. Like, we were probably 80 miles offshore or something, or 30 or 50. I don't remember what it is, but far enough away that you can really see the stars, and it was pretty cool. And seeing, everyone talks about like the bioluminescence in the water, and you could just see it streaming out from behind the boat as we were sailing along with no engine noise or anything. It was pretty cool.
Seeing the sunrise, the sunset, the stars, the bioluminescence, I would recommend everybody do an overnight passage. It was a really cool experience. It was exhausting and definitely was challenging, but I really liked that first one a lot more than all the other overnights that we've done.
Yeah. No, it was really good, enjoyable. I liked it. It was a good first experience. It could have been a lot worse.
So then we got to Key West. We stayed for a couple of days, and then we were planning on leaving. I think we were planning on staying for like 4 days and leaving during a weather window. Weather window came way earlier than we thought. And so we were in Key West for about a day and a half, I think, before we decided that we actually needed to leave the next day. So we left Key West early, kind of in a rush, because we wanted to take a calm weather window down to Havana. for the next passage because we had to cross the Gulf Stream and we needed some northerly situation so that it wouldn't be opposing the Gulf Stream, which I think we're going to talk about that experience in the next podcast, so I won't go into it. But after that passage was another really big first for us, was pulling into a new country, which is a little crazy.
Yeah, I think for me, going back to leaving the dock for the year, that's when it really hit me, was like pulling into Cuba. And you're just like, oh God, like this is, and the experience in Cuba was like, there was really no one there to help you. We couldn't find a lot of things we needed. And that really made me feel for the first time that we were gone for like good. You know, like in America, you're still in America, you can still get anything you need anywhere you want. And you can walk a few miles and get whatever you need. But it really hit me in Cuba. But yeah, pulling up the Q flag and putting up our courtesy flag was pretty cool. We were just like really ready to be there because we had been going really slow because of the Gulf Stream. And yeah, it got a little crazy when we went into the channel, but
we were really grateful. We were calling them on the radio from 12 miles out because we just wanted them to answer. We wanted to know that we were going to be good. And they didn't answer till 4 or 5 miles out. And when they finally answered, they were super nice. They spoke English. They gave us directions. They were yelling at us directions the whole time into the channel, like middle of the channel. What was the degree that he was saying?
140, 140.
We were trying our best, but the waves and the winds were crazy. So we're trying to stay in the middle of the channel. But they were nice and helpful, and they checked us in right away. And we just weren't sure what to expect. So that was. Despite Cuba being a very difficult part of our trip, the checking in process was actually really easy. And we'll also talk about that in a separate video and podcast because we didn't know what to expect because there's not a lot of information out there. But yeah, I think that was a good first as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was nice because it was like you arrive, you have to go to a marina, but you have kind of everything you need there, sort of. I mean, you have your electric, water. You have a safe place to dock. You don't got to worry about an anchorage or anything. You're good. You're good. You made it, and then the check-in is all in the same place, so you don't really have to worry about. You can just kind of relax a little bit, which was really nice for us after doing a couple of overnights and over the open ocean for the first time. So it was a good first experience for sure.
So we stayed in Havana for a little bit, mostly quarantined, and then just one day exploring Havana. And then when you're sailing, everything is weather dependent. So we wanted to make a couple other weather windows. So we ended up leaving Havana and then going just 4 hours west. Yeah, west to a little bay. We actually ended up cutting in kind of early because the seas and the winds were getting crazy. We knew that there were high winds coming, but they just came a little early. So we cut in before we thought we were going to into this bay that was not really recommended on the charts, but it was a great anchorage, but there was no one around. So this was our first time anchoring in literally the middle of nowhere with no sign of humanity. I don't know how you feel about that, but for me it was weird. I'm an introvert. I like being alone. I don't mind being in secluded places. I like to camp. I like to hike. I like to do things where there's not a lot of people around, but this was just a really strange feeling for me because there was literally no one, nothing. We knew the weather was about to get bad. We were about to sit here for 3 days waiting out 30-knot winds, and it was just, I had this weird anxiety of oh my gosh, we're completely alone. No matter what we did on the radio, no one was going to answer. There was no city around, nowhere we could go if we needed help. It was just weird for me. I felt weird. I felt like I wanted to get out of there. I felt trapped.
Yeah, I mean, in America, or pretty much anywhere you ever go on vacation, or if you have a boat, if you take your boat out, there's always a bunch of other boats. There's a bunch of businesses around. There's people out on the beach. There's people out on their boats. There's people out walking. It's very strange to be near a coastline somewhere and there's just nobody there. It's pretty weird. No towns, no boats anywhere. You're just alone in this bay, and they're about to get 30 knots, 35 knots of wind for the next couple of days, and you're just like, well, hope everything's okay. And it's a little scary because it's you really do feel like if something were to happen, you're literally on your own. And I mean that, like, also if like someone wanted to like try to rob you, or if they weren't happy that Americans were there or whatever it is, which that did not happen, and the Cuban people were amazing. But you get that feeling, so you really feel like, okay, it's literally just us. If something happens here, we have to take care of ourselves, which is a unique feeling that you don't get very often. So that was interesting.
Yeah, we kind of ended up feeling that way all the way down across the coast of Cuba along the northern side. We didn't really see anyone the whole time. There was a couple random fishermen, but
yeah, and we saw one sailboat, like I think it was like the third day of sailing west alone out there. We saw one sailboat, and it was going the other way, and it was like pretty far offshore. That was the only other boat we saw, pretty much, other than a couple of fishermen the whole time.
Yeah, for like a week. It was crazy. Yeah, like I said, we'll talk about Cuba next time, but that was kind of the experience all along Cuba. And then we got to Cabo San Antonio area, the end of Cuba, basically, before we were about to leave for Mexico. And we had a pretty cool first. We sailed off of anchor for the first time, which was really cool.
Yeah. People always talk about that, wanting to like try sailing on and off anchor. And we were just in the middle of this little anchorage completely alone. I mean, there was no one there. And there was like, I don't know, I think it was maybe like, it was the morning, and it seems like the winds here tend to be, overnight they calm down. And then in the morning, they're still calm, but they start to build until the afternoon. And then they're about the strongest, about 3 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they're going to die again. So anyways, in the morning it was nice, no other boats around. We had plenty of room for, no shallow water. So we're like, yeah, let's just sail off the anchor. So pulled the main up, pulled the anchor, and we just slowly drifted and then turned toward going downwind. And then we just sailed all the way to Mexico just like that. It was pretty cool.
So a couple other random firsts that we had during that passage, right when we sailed off of anchor was the first time we had seen that crystal clear blue Caribbean water, and it was literally incredible.
I think we would have seen it more in Cuba, but the winds were so high constantly that it was making the water stirred up and you couldn't see it. But we finally saw it on the end, and it was like, oh wow, like this is the Caribbean, like this is so beautiful. You're seeing like different shades of green and dark blues and whites for the sand, and it was pretty cool.
Talk about sailing highs. We were on a super high during that time because it was just gorgeous. Like we just hadn't seen anything like
Cuba.
It.
We were like, we haven't seen any people, we haven't seen any food, like we haven't been able to get off the boat in like a week. Like, oh my god, we're going to Mexico, it's gonna be great. We're so excited.
Another first that I had during that passage was my first time getting seasick. I had been totally fine the whole time, and it just hit me all of a sudden. I went down below, which learned my lesson, shouldn't have done that. And I was messing with some stuff down below, and I came back up, and it was like just the worst feeling ever. Like I didn't throw up or anything, but I felt just nauseous for hours. I couldn't. The sun was going down.
It was because it was that thing that people talk about where you're sailing and then you lose the wind, but the swell is still there. So like there was no wind. We weren't really moving, and we're just rolling and rolling.
Just bobbing around, basically.
And that's not a good feeling.
Terrible. I think you were feeling similar, but it was just my first time, and I
think you went down below, and that made it worse.
Yeah,
I didn't go down below.
Made it a lot worse. So I ended up I don't like taking drugs, but I had some seasickness meds, and I ended up taking them, and they were a lifesaver. But man, for all of you out there who get seasick and still sail, I have a lot of respect for you, because that was one of the worst experiences I've had so far. Those couple hours were absolutely terrible, and I was pretty mean because I was just so uncomfortable. But yeah, that was the not so fun first. What other firsts did we have during that passage? First time sailing with a moon.
Yeah, sailing with a full moon. That was actually really nice because you could see so well. The first time we did an overnight, it was, actually both of them, all the way to Cuba, we had no moon, and it was a little bit kind of nerve-wracking. I mean, it was nice because you kind of felt like you didn't feel like you were out in the middle of nowhere because you couldn't see anything anyway. But when you would see like freighter lights out in the distance, you got a little concerned because you couldn't really see the boat. You could just see lights. Whenever we had the full moon,
It looked like a sun.
yeah,
It was lighting
very
up
bright.
everything.
Yeah, and like I could pull my binoculars out and I could see a freighter like 5 miles away, and I could like literally see the boat like it was almost daylight. It was pretty cool. Made me feel a little safer, but
Yeah, that was pretty fun. There weren't as many stars, so it's a trade-off. But yeah, it was. It didn't even feel like nighttime, really.
No.
My first time seeing a huge pod of dolphins during that passage, which was so freaking cool. They just followed our boat. We had some tricky times during that passage where we didn't know if we were going to make it. Anyways, we got stuck and we were out there for a really long time. But at the very end of it, when we finally got out of the current, these dolphins came and they were just kind of like leading us into Mexico, like just like kind of swimming at the front of our boat for a good 30 minutes. It was amazing. So that was just really cool. Another one of those highs that is really welcomed after a night of lows.
Yeah.
And then we sailed onto anchor when we got to Mexico, which was cool because we had sailed off of anchor in Cuba.
Yeah. We had a little bit of stuff going on with our engine, with oil and stuff. We'll talk about that when we talk more about Cuba, right? We're talking more about Cuba?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we'll go into more about what all happened with that story. But either way, we couldn't motor into the anchorage. We literally couldn't. So luckily when we got here, it was like 8 to 10 knots of wind. The seas were calm. It was beautiful. And so we sailed into the Isla Mujeres harbor, and it was crazy because we started seeing all the boats, and there were people out on the beach partying. It was like, whoa, this is way different than Cuba. Like, we're finally back to civilization, basically. And so, we sailed, we tacked a few times, and we went in just to the very back of the anchorage, and yeah, we did a few tacks, pulled the Genoa in, and kind of coasted on the main only until we went head up into the wind, and we basically just coasted to a stop, dropped the anchor, pulled the main in, and it was good. It was easy. It was awesome. Yeah.
And then the last first on this journey from Florida to Mexico, we've been here at Isla Mujeres for about a week, a little over a week now. And I would say this is the first time that an anchorage has started to feel like home. Before this, we've been at anchor for like a day here, 2 days there. Like nothing, it has felt very transient. And now that we've been here for a couple of days, it really, like, we're able to get whatever we need. We've met a lot of people. There's people around, but we still have our ability to be secluded on our boat. It really feels like this is our home. I actually left to go to work. I flew back to the States for a couple of days, and when I was flying back, I was like, oh, I'm excited to go home. That was a feeling that I had. So that was really nice.
Yeah, it's kind of like our first like real cruising anchor. Like we really feel like a cruiser here, or like a community that we've never felt because we've never been anywhere long enough. We have friends we call on the radio, and we go play dominoes with them, and we know where the grocery stores are. We know how to get water. We know where the fuel dock is. We know where all the dinghy docks are and the people who own them, and we talk to them and whatever. It's just pretty cool. I like it a lot. Definitely a much needed break from the really constant sailing. I can see why a lot of people like to spend a lot of time in each place, because it can be very exhausting and kind of get you down on the whole boat life, really pushing yourself, because sailing is hard. And then once you get somewhere and you can relax in an anchorage, it's like, man, this is nice. I want to stay here longer, basically.
So the point of this, we're newbies. We just started sailing, and we have been going for about a month now, and we've experienced a lot of firsts. We've done a lot of things for the first time, and it's been okay. We've made it through. We didn't really have very much experience, and so you can do whatever you want to do. People out there who want to go sailing and have a dream to start traveling, you just got to do it. There's some of these firsts where were pretty low, and
low.
really challenging, and like really made us question our decisions. But some of them were really, really high highs, and kind of made it worth it in the end. So I don't know. I think, you know, firsts are fun, and they're also challenging and scary, but we feel like a lot more alive having done all of the things we've done in the past month.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in the future, as we keep going, all of these things will start to feel less and less like big moments. It'll start to become just kind of like a normal thing, you know? Like sailing into a new country won't be as exciting, or, you know, having amazing sunsets or whatever. You'll start to get used to that probably, you know, over time.
So enjoy every moment.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time.
Peace.
Hey, thanks everybody for tuning in to another episode of the Sencilla podcast. Please like, rate, comment, or share if you enjoyed the episode. If you'd like to support us, you can by subscribing to our YouTube channel or Patreon, where you can get some additional content and some cool swag. Check out our website at sailingsencilla.com, where you can learn more about us and our mission, and links to all the content we produce each week. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.